Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today to this event. I'm super excited to be talking with Konrad today. I'm Jonah from Spotlight, and if you've been to any past Spotlight events, you know that we do a combo of things. We love to just host events where we teach you a lot about everything from email marketing to copy, like we're going to be talking today. But it is so valuable, and I also adore these events where we get to actually sit down with a creator, see what all of this stuff, this ethereal knowledge actually looks like in practice. And today, like I said, we are talking to Konrad Sanders. Konrad, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Yeah, excited to be on the show.
Yeah.
Ready to get started. And I have to say, I very much enjoyed the countdown music that was played in the 30 seconds prior to this. So it got me pumped.
Oh, got you. We gotta get I never play that on my home stereo, but I'm glad it did it for you.
It worked for me. It worked.
That's awesome. Well, and for everyone watching, whether you're watching live or the replay, please hop into that comment section. Give us a shout out. Let us know where you're tuning in from, something you're excited to learn, how you heard about Spotlight, how you heard about Konrad, and also just any questions you have throughout the event today. Pop them in there. If we don't answer them right away, we're getting to it. We haven't ignored you, and we've also set aside a little time at the end to make sure we get to any of those questions you have. And also, like I said, there will be a replay of today's event. So if you have to get up away from the computer, life happens around you, or you weren't able to make it today, the replay will be on the Spotlight by Teachable YouTube. It'll also be on the spotlightapp.io website and emailed to you along with some additional resources and follow-ups if you RSVP to the event. So none of this information is getting lost, and it'll all be here for you whenever you need it. All that said, let's dig in. So, Konrad, we are talking about copywriting and specifically writing copy that can actually sell your products while remaining authentic to yourself and your brand and your voice. But just to get started, for anyone who may not know you or is just tuning in for the first time today, can you just give a little background on yourself, your own journey, and where you are today?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I'll say that I will run the risk of going off on a tangent, so feel free to rein me in.
Love a good tangent, though.
Yeah, I'll go off on multiple detours, but try to come back round to the question. I might start with where I am now, and then I'll tell you the backstory. So just briefly, my name's Konrad. Obviously, I like to wear a hat, as you can see. I am the co-founder of an agency called The Creative Copywriter. So I run that with my other half, my partner in crime, who's also my wife. And in a nutshell, we do strategy and words. And we work with a lot of big, sexy brands like TikTok, Adidas, Mercedes-Benz, Hyundai, etc., and also a lot of tech startups and scale-ups that we help to grow by writing copy that works. And we're obviously going to dig into that. My history, where do I start? I was born in 1984 on a summer's day, 27th of August. Now, I think I'll skip ahead a bit. In terms of, I think I'll start, when I was a young teen, I'll start there. I was a young teen. I was kind of into those, I don't know if you remember them, those kind of nerdy, choose your own adventure fighting fantasy books. Where
Yeah.
This page and that one. I was into those, and actually I created my own one called Forest of Fear. It never got published. I started it when I was 10, and I think it kind of finished it around age 14. So it's pretty crappy at the beginning, and then gradually the quality of the writing and illustrations got better over time. I was always into creating kind of art and writing together. I love music as well, but we'll save that for another conversation. Years later, I studied philosophy at uni, which is kind of one of those subjects that gives you so much, but also so little in terms of a career, a clear career path. But what I was very good at was writing. I'm kind of a last minute sort of person, so I was very good at banging out essays 2 days before the deadline, and then running down to uni with, back then you'd actually have it printed out in the world.
Yeah.
So I was very good at kind of under pressure, structuring an argument, creating a message hierarchy and writing well according to a brief. And I loved writing, as I said. After uni, I'm going to try and speed it up now. After uni, I went to Australia. I met my wife, now business partner, Nitzan, who's from Israel, and we traveled around for 2 years, trying to prolong the relationship. I ended up moving to Israel. I didn't have a work visa. She was working. It took a while to get work visa. I was living in her parents' lovely home, being fed lovely Israeli food from her mum. And essentially, that's when I was like, right, what am I doing with my life? What shall I do? And I had the internet available to me, and I started taking courses. I discovered what copywriting was. I discovered this amazing thing where you can use writing to make money, which was amazing because I was always entrepreneurial as well. And combining creativity with the entrepreneurial side was energizing for me. So I learned to write copy. I learned the ins and outs of the art and science of copywriting. And I also learned SEO, so search engine optimization. And the two kind of combined and is where really the beginnings of my freelance career and then the agency began, because I had that combination of knowing how to get traffic to a website and then how to convert that traffic with copy. And I did it for myself. There's a reason why our agency is called The Creative Copywriter, because ironically, it's not the most creative name, but it does what it says on the tin and it brings in that traffic. So anyone searching for creative copywriting in pretty much any country around the world will now find our agency site. So, it was that combination of, SEO data research side with the learning the ins and outs and the art and science of copywriting that is where it all began. And years later, here I am.
There you go.
Running the agency.
Yeah. That's I love the story. And real quick, a question from the audience. Claiming your best life is saying, Konrad, love your accent. Where are you at?
We're getting to the important questions.
Yeah.
I like it. Good comments so far. I'm from Southeast London, and this is where I am right now in lovely, sunny, believe it or not, Southeast London. So Greenwich, if you've heard of Greenwich, it's where time starts. That's where I live, just round the corner from where time begins.
Oh, so you see the day first every day?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Love.
Pretty much.
Well, and so I just wanted to lay out some basics before we get into any details. And for anyone watching today, you probably know what copywriting is, or copy in general, but the term can hang some people up at first. So in your words, Konrad, what is copy? Where does it show up? How can we as creators recognize when we're talking about copywriting?
Yeah, that's a good first question. Let's get that out of the way. What is copy? What are we talking about? I would say, if I were to try to be succinct, copy essentially is the words that we use, the written words that we use in marketing and advertising in order to compel, convince, and convert our customers. And to give examples, when you go to a website and you read that wording there, those words, they're copy, right? When you are driving past the billboard, the words in that advert, that's copy. Those emails that you get every day, probably far too many of them, probably with not very good copy most of the time, essentially that's copy. The subject line that will either, the make or break subject line that it's either gonna intrigue you enough to open the email or not. That's a very important piece of real estate, and that's very important copy. So all of the above.
Well, and the big point I wanted, first off, I dropped in the comments those 3 words: compel, convince, and convert. That's a fantastic way to synthesize that all. But I really wanted to hone in, and you said it perfectly. Just it's easy to forget how much thought goes into just the subject line of an email and how much effort is put into all of these things. Or sometimes, like you mentioned, when you start getting into this, you start going like, "That's really bad copy." You start seeing these things.
Yeah.
So for everyone here today, I just want Conrad to define that and get our heads in this space where we start paying attention to it. Because just like music or anything, you start playing an instrument, you start listening to music differently. You start
You
paying
do.
attention to copy, you start reading differently. So
Uh, can I add a little thought
yeah,
to that?
please, please.
Um, I think that's great, right? Like pay attention. So that's a great tip. Pay attention because it's all around you, right? We're exposed to supposedly between 4,000 and 10,000 ads a day, which sounds kind of scary and ridiculous, but it's all around us. Most of the time we ignore it. What I would say is if you find yourself opening a cold email from someone that you've never met or don't know, um, and reading that email, then that's a good point for to stop and pause and go, hang on, what is it about that email, amongst all of the other crap I've got in my inbox that actually made me open it? Why do I feel this way? The same goes for social media, scrolling down LinkedIn, and there's something that stops you in your tracks, whether it's a post or an ad. What is it that's pay attention to that, because I think you can learn a lot by reverse engineering things in general, not just copy, design. When you have a great experience, or you click next, and someone takes you down their marketing funnel. They've done something very smart, and they probably have good copy, probably also good UX and good strategy, but it's likely that the copy is good. So I think that's a great first tip, is to pay attention, keep your ears and eyes open, and if something's working on you, there's a reason why it's working.
Yeah. And that leads perfectly into the next question, but I did also want to highlight this comment because it also just relates great. The Claiming Your Best Life is saying, I love how the industry has pivoted to more of a talking speak in copy versus like a very more formal, perfectly polished sentences and everything. And that leads me to the next thing I wanted to ask you, which is that I think it's really easy for people to assume right off the bat that you have to be an incredible writer to get into copywriting. And although that helps, although all those years you spent writing and studying philosophy and all of that, for people who are just starting out and maybe don't have the cash to hire a copywriter or want to get good at it themselves, I'm suspicious that it's not always true that you do have to be a great writer. What do you think is the like most important place for someone to start, or the most important thing for someone to conceptualize about writing their own copy for their business?
Yeah, great question. With a few layers in there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
you're
I'm
layering it up.
I'm I'm
That's
baiting I'm baiting you for tangents.
that's it. Just drop those nuggets in there. So obviously it helps, right, to have natural writing kind of ability. That naturally does help. But we've seen so many copywriters that are, let's say, well, I say copywriters, people going through our academy, and they're great writers, but they just can't get it. They don't get the business side of things. There's so many other elements to copywriting beyond just being a good writer. And there is this very common assumption and misconception that also that, if you're a good writer, you can just naturally write good copy. And I think that so many businesses, small and large, including like some of the biggest in the world, make that mistake of just grabbing, any Tom, Dick, or Harry from their marketing department who can write well, and just getting them to write copy. Whereas there's so much more to it. It's a science and an art. There's tried and trusted techniques which you should learn. But if I'm to come back to your question and go for one thing, I would say that the number one sort of focus that if I had to pick one, is to avoid what I call inside out thinking. So for me,
Mm,
inside, when a marketer, a business owner, a copywriter kind of just goes with their own idea. They go, I've got a great idea, I'm going to push it out to the world. I've got a great idea for a marketing campaign, so I think everyone else will think it's a great idea. Or I think this copy is great, so I'm making the assumption there that all of my prospects will understand what I'm talking about. Right? We call it the curse of knowledge. Like, you know what you know, but they don't know it. And you can kind of make the assumption that everyone loves what you love. So what I'm trying to say is, I think a key area of copywriting and marketing and writing good copy for businesses is taking yourself out of your own mind, out of your own shoes, and putting yourself in the shoes of the audience. And that's crucial. It's about understanding, ideally through gathering some kind of insights or doing research, understanding the pain points of your audience, what keeps them up at night, their desires, what's going to change their life, what's that dream scenario, change their life or the life of their business if it's B2B. What are their perceived barriers? Why would they think, no, I don't fancy that product or service, it's not for me? What's their journey during that sales cycle? So all of these insights, if you understand them, and I can tell you in a second how you gather those insights. If you understand them, you can then bridge the gap between those pains, desires, triggers, etc., to what you're selling, your unique offering. And that's what's really crucial. You can have copy that is just clear. And I actually say to my copywriters, I say, creativity is great, and we're called the creative copywriter, and it's definitely something that we weave into most of our copy, but clarity should trump creativity. You should never write something that's overly smart, overly clever and creative, at the risk of losing clarity. It's so much more important to be clear and know what it is that your audience are looking for, and then just write it. Write what is that unique value that they're looking for, and then tell them that your product or service offers that value. So I will go back to, how do you gather those insights? And the easiest way is to talk to them, talk to your customers, talk to your audience, right? It seems so simple, but yet so many businesses don't do it. So what we run as an agency is a thing called buyer interviews, which sounds fancy, but really what it is just talking to the audience, the customers of our clients, and getting them to talk through their journey and understand what are your pain points, what are you looking for, etc., etc. So then we can write copy that really works, that really pops and sizzles, and that really does what it needs to do, which is usually move them to action, persuade them to take the next step, whether that next step is buying a product or whether that next step is downloading an ebook or a white paper or whatever it is. Understand your audience. That's more important than, I'm saying this now here for the first time, your audience is more important than having natural writing skills.
Oh man, I love and hate so much of what you just said. I love it because it's so true and I've seen it work. I hate it for how many times I've done that inside out thing.
Yeah.
So I guess I hate the reflection I have to make on from everything, right? All the way from making products through to copywriting. It's tricky. And then, but that does, I want to kind of flip it now. If But a lot of what you just said is so relevant to this. But for anyone who's interested in writing copy for someone else, which
Yeah.
many people I think start trying to write for their own business, but also once you develop that skill, you realize I can do this for other people. So we just talked about your voice and making sure you know how to write to your customer. Is there anything that you advise is a little different if you're trying to write for someone else's brand or for someone else's products?
Yeah, sure. So obviously the kind of advice I just gave is definitely applicable to this scenario. Naturally, if you're become a copywriter, a freelance copywriter or an agency copywriter, and you're writing for another business, you need to understand their audience as one of the first steps. But it's a little bit more complex because we, as copywriters, we need to balance that with the goals of the client, right? So for us, it's about having a good discovery process whereby, I'll give you an example. For us, when we onboard a new client, we have two separate briefing sheets. One is called a brand exploration sheet, which is where we ask all the questions that we need to about their brand. What's their what are their brand values? What's their brand value proposition and elevator pitch? What's their brand personality if they've gone through that strategic branding process? What's their brand voice? Get them to describe it. Branding, I think part of branding is personification, turning a company, an organization, almost into a human person, right? Because we're social creatures. That's why we say values, and that's why we say voice, because those are human qualities. And as a copywriter, what we're doing is we're giving the personification of that company a voice and the words that it's speaking. So you know, that initial discovery phase, we would dig into understanding their goals. What are they aiming to achieve? Who they are as a company? Who are the people they're talking to? And then the next sheet that we send over is a project brief sheet, which is much more granular about you know, what they want to achieve with each asset. What are they doing? Is it a website copy? Is it a landing page? What's the goal? What's the call to action? CTA is such a common thing that you need to ask as a copywriter, because like I said, one of the main things we aim to do is move people to action. So what is that action that we want to move them to? So yeah, there's more considerations there. There's kind of really understanding the business goals, the marketing and sales goals of that company, the personal goals of the person you're interacting with, and understanding the brand, and then understanding the audience and kind of balancing all these things. So there's a lot you have to kind of take in, and then sometimes you've just got to write a few sentences that encapsulates all of that information. So not always an easy task, but it's a fun one if you're into it.
Yeah, what a puzzle. Then you have to take all of that and write a Instagram caption or something. It's what a trip. Well, and so just as I synthesize what you're saying, it sounds like that's a helpful thing to do, even if you're just writing for yourself, right? To like take yourself out and treat your brand as a separate entity and do that exercise for yourself.
I really think so. Yeah, definitely. If you've got a business, yeah, definitely. Like this is something that I can send on as a link to our brand exploration sheet. You know, if you can't answer those questions about your business right now, then you probably need to put a bit of thought into that. And look, it's often a case of the plumber with leaky pipes at home. You know, like it's quite common for you, even as an agency, copywriting or other, to be, you know, giving all this advice and offering strategy to clients and going through this process. But when it comes to your own brand strategy or your own voice, you haven't worked quite as hard on it. But yeah, it will really set you up for success. I think that the brand foundations, we call it that brand DNA, you kind of build everything else on top of that. Everything else makes sense. You know, when you're sending an email, you'll know what voice it should be in, right? And you write a copy for your website, you'll know which values you should be talking about. You know what if you've defined your value proposition, you'll basically know what that header and subheader should be on your homepage. And that's such important real estate. That's what they read first of all. That's the make or break moment, right? What we say often is that generally you have about 6 seconds to for someone to make a decision whether to stay on your site and read more or not. And the same was true of newspaper ads back in Ogilvy's time, you know, like 60, 70 years ago. The headline was so important. That's the most, or the email subject line, that's the most important line. That the most amount of thought should go into that, because if you haven't intrigued them enough, if you haven't kind of pandered to their ego or talked enough about the value that they're interested in, and done all the things that you can and should do with a header, they just simply won't continue reading. They'll click on one of the other 20 tabs they have open at that time, or just go back into those very addictive social media platforms that are consuming our lives. So yeah, it's very, very important.
Yeah. Well, so couple things. Twin Kennedy was asking a great question. We'll ask it a little later because it's more about just how you structure yourself as a copywriter. But you're
Okay.
touching on exactly the next thing I wanted to get to, which is brevity. And it's both a thrill and a disappointment with any copywriters I've worked with or myself when writing copy for my own business, where you work really hard, you write this amazing paragraph, and then you realize that people probably aren't going to read 90% of it.
Mm,
And I've also followed those like psychology numbers. I think in the 90s it was like you have 10 seconds and now it's down to 6
yeah.
seconds.
Yeah.
So it's also like how do you deal with this, and as a copywriter make sure that you are keeping brief but poignant but powerful, but also remaining authentic to the way you might speak? And do you have any, like, do you have the chopping block tool you put yourself through when you've written a paragraph and you need to get it down to a sentence? What's your advice for that process?
That's again a multi-layered question. I will try
Yeah.
to dissect it and tackle it bit by bit. So regarding brevity, I think you raised a few very interesting and good points there. People often do like to skim and scan, right? So it's important to, let's say you're writing website copy, to factor that in. But there will be other people that are there ready to read every word, and you've grabbed them enough. And I think you have to cater to both. Um, and one way that you can do that is, again, I'm focusing now because I've got in my head like a landing page or a home page or a website copy. One way you can do that, first of all, is by after you've written your copy, just read the headers and subheaders, right? Imagine someone only reads those, or even better, get someone else to read it. Curse of knowledge, as we said. Get someone else, a friend, a family member, a colleague, to just read those headers. Will they get the gist of it? Will they know what your value proposition is? Will they know just from that what you're offering, what you're about, why you're unique, why you're different, and why they should learn more? That's a great way to check if you are, writing a page that is skimmable and scannable and still gets the message across. Back to kind of chopping, the big chop we call it. Generally, like, you should write, we call choppy copy, especially in the digital world, online world. One thought per sentence is a nice little tip. So one way is, if you've written a long old sentence, generally it's just going to be harder to read for people because we're distracted. We've got the attention spans of goldfish. We call this the goldfish lens. At our agency, we have this framework called the 13 lenses. I won't go into that for now. It might weave its way into the rest of the conversation. It's one thought per sentence. You can quite easily break a long sentence up with this very special thing that over here we call the full stop. I believe you call it the period, right?
Yep.
Correct. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's such a beautiful thing, right? There's a long sentence. You can find ways, just put full stops in there, break it down. And one thing I would say when you're doing that is, don't be too bogged down by, let's say, the grammar rules that you learn in English language class at school. You can start a sentence with and, with or, whatever. This comes onto the conversational side of things. Conversational copy works, and I believe someone asked a question before. I saw that pop up. Conversational copy has actually worked ever since copywriting existed. So if you look at the newspaper, the good newspaper ads of literally 100 years ago, they were very, very conversational. And I think we just got into this digital world where businesses just started writing kind of professional corporate copy. But the reality is the good copy has always been conversational. And that includes kind of stopping, having a nice flow, putting full stops in, like I'm doing now, having kind of brief little nuggets that are easier to read and digest. And I'll address that multi-layered question with another answer. Ernest Hemingway famously, but this was actually, he famously supposedly said, write drunk, edit sober. I think that's, but it was misquoted. It wasn't Ernest Hemingway, but everyone
Right.
says it was him. That's a great tip for actually, writing copy. Get that content down. You often will go over. It might be too chunky. It might be too long, but it's important to just get it down. Otherwise, you might have this thing we call the self-editing demon, where you're just rereading the sentence and you're not making any progress, and you get writer's block, right? It's quite hard. You're like, I don't know what to write next. Just get it down, get your thoughts brain dump on the page, right? You can even cover your screen. This is a nice little tip. Cover your screen and just write the whole page of copy, or the whole blog post, or the whole email from beginning to end. Another way to do it is to speak out loud and have it transcribed. Google Docs can do that for you. And then edit and come back the next day and edit again, and like fine tune and chisel away at it. And if you understand the principles of good copy, then you can be, you can kind of analyze and optimize and edit and go, right, well, that's too long and that paragraph's too chunky. So how can I chop it down? Or it's not conversational enough, so how can I make it more conversational and more authentic? And I guess, was that the last part of your question, or is that going to be another question?
No, you did. You got to everything, and I want to pull a couple nuggets out in there, just like really actionable stuff, like the use of a period or an end stop. Like that's a powerful tool. Not being attached to grammar. I've had that experience more and more, where like as we test our copy and everything and refine it, we find often it's not grammatically correct copy that works and that communicates the idea. So I loved you said, and I also really appreciate, and this is a follow-up question I have to ask, which is I appreciate that you identified that there are times for lengthy copy and there are times for brevity. I can think of a few email lists and creators I've worked with where their newsletter is 3-4 pages long, and their
Yeah,
story narrative driven powerful pieces, and like that's the right place for it. But how do
100.
you identify where it's time to be brief and where it's time to pour your heart out and really,
That's also a good
yeah.
question. And I would say, back to our 13 lenses, which I'm starting to sprinkle into the conversation.
Yep, yep.
Maybe I'll give you a quick explanation of what I'm actually talking about. So I developed a framework called the 13 lenses, which is a way to analyze and optimize copy and content at any and every step of the customer journey. So if you think of like, I don't know if you're a good cook, Jonah, but if you
I
think of
love cooking.
you like cooking, there you go. So you need to balance, like you need to get the balance right. You need all of the ingredients. You want your sauce to be salty but not too salty. You want it to be sweet but not too sweet. So the 13 lenses are like 13 different ingredients that you need to balance and get right, which we've actually turned into a kind of a checklist that our editor can go through when looking at every piece of copy. So went on a bit of a tangent there, but what I would say is the one lens that you are now talking about is the context lens. So what is the context? Where are they at their stage of the journey? What platform are you on? All of these things will factor into something like length. But just to try and put this into context, I guess you can kind of think through logically. If someone's on social media, what are they doing? What's the context? Why are they there? They're probably there to like scroll through very quickly, right? And just so a really long form packed paragraph, like if you're an addict, probably isn't going to work there. That's where brevity is needed. But if they've made the decision to subscribe to your newsletter, they've made that conscious choice and they're looking for value. That's the value lens. They're looking for that. Then, or a blog post, right? They've clicked and they've gone to a blog post. They probably know what a blog post is there, the reason for it. usually to get some education, some value and or entertainment. So you can write long form content there and in that newsletter, for example. So I think it really depends on where they are in that stage. Have they, and the platform, the stage of awareness they're at, the stage of the journey, and thinking that through. And you know, what I'd say is that what you can also do, you can have long form content that is also kind of skimmable and scannable, right? And that's what you need to do when it comes to blog posts. So if you're thinking about search engine optimization, about SEO, actually, arguably, articles of around 2,000 words often perform best, right? Which might seem very long, but if you're writing something that long, there should be lots of subheaders. There should be bullet points, right? Subheaders are bullet points. Maybe a little TLDR section at the beginning, so people can jump through. So the skimmers and scanners can find the information they want, and those that are sitting down on their lunch break want to kind of consume your content. They may be subscribers of your content. They like what you're putting out there. They can read every word. So again, you're catering to both. So I think you can kind of achieve both. And I think that long form copy is, because we've gone down this angle of like it's got to be short, choppy, brief. I think you can differentiate with long form. And I'll give you an example. The Jack Daniels adverts, the Jack Daniels billboard ads in London, in the underground, I imagine elsewhere in the world also, they use this old school copy technique of like long form. It's all text, and there's about, I don't know, maybe 200 words there. But they understand that you're there, you're standing for a few minutes, right, before the tube comes, before the train comes. You've got time to read it, and it really stands out because all the others are just visuals with a few words. And they use, again, these old school like copywriting techniques of using this like really distinct Jack Daniels tone of voice. You feel like you're talking to someone from the deep south. You know, they're there, and you read it, and it's really beautifully unique. And again, I feel like, because if the industry is zigging, there's an opportunity to zag, even if it might feel a bit counterintuitive and against kind of modern best practices. But sometimes you just do something different, and that's enough to grab attention and do what you want to do.
God, I love what you're saying so much, and especially it's like that context lens seems it seems like there's really not a lot of right and wrong if you're really clear about your context.
Yeah.
And yeah. Well, and so I want to keep kind of getting through the layers here, and there's all of these things that we're considering. We talked about this a little bit right before going live today, but there's like, you're talking, there's 13 lenses, there's SEO to consider, there's bullet points, there's your voice or your client's voice or all of this. But assuming that you're writing for your business, and this is a challenge I've seen a lot of copywriters go through, when they learn about all these things, they start sounding like someone else. And although that can be a valuable muscle and tool to develop, so you can do that, if you are trying to build a platform for yourself and of yourself, do you have any advice to like how you check yourself and make sure that you are still remaining authentic and sounding like you as you build that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a difficult one to answer, I think. I agree. I think often when people are writing copy for their business, they can lead themselves down various paths, such as getting the kind of conversion. And again, I'm going to keep talking about lenses. I apologize. We have the action lens for us. So just focusing too much on sales psychology, right? And they end up sounding like a kind of a car salesman from the 90s, and it's, today, because they understand that does help, and using a sense of urgency and a sense of scarcity, things like that work. But if you overdo it, then it's going to have an adverse kind of effect. At the same time, as you said, And now we call this the real talk lens, which is about being authentic, being conversational, sounding like you. You know, if you don't apply that, then you might, you know, and you just copy the front runner in your industry, you'll end up being another lookalike, another sounder like, you know, another copycat. And authenticity is really important. Differentiation is important. Again, that's the zigzag lens and the real talk lens. I guess to answer your question, I think it comes back to what I said about the cooking an amazing sauce or meal. I think it just comes back to balance. I don't know how to give like real tangible advice about how to check yourself and how to get that balance right, other than, you know, factor all of these things in, you know, get that balance right. You want to sound authentic and sound like you, but you also want to do enough to speak in the language of your audience, and you want to convert people, and it's about getting that balance right. Obviously, well, one thing I can do to help tangibly is I can send out a PDF with our 13 lenses in, because basically that framework is something that you can use as almost a checklist when you're writing a copy, and just to look and go, okay, am I doing that? Am I doing that? So that's one thing I can do.
I was leading towards
there you
asking.
go.
Yeah, can we get that?
30 lenses. That's it. I'm here to promote them. It wasn't intended that way, but again, we built it for that very reason. It's how we as an agency check ourselves, you know. So I would advise, use it. You know, I'm happy to give that out for free. So use it. Another great way to see if your copy is resonating in a number of ways is by sending it out to other people, right? Again, you can get so stuck into, it's the same with art actually. You kind of like, because I do street art, and you can get so, if I'm painting a face, you're so stuck in like that creative space that it's hard to see the wood for the trees. And like, you know, sometimes you need to come back the next day and it looks completely different. Or a trick with art is look at it in a mirror, because it's the opposite, and you notice the flaws, you notice the bits that you didn't notice. And with copy, again, it's very hard in one session, you've been stuck in that, working and chiseling away at it, to really look at it with fresh eyes, because you don't have those fresh eyes. So a really great thing to do is just simply send it on to a few other people, get them to read it out loud. That's another great way. You can read it out loud, that's a little tip. If you can get someone else to read it out loud in front of you, that's perfect, because then you'll hear it. So it's almost like looking or reading, you know, experiencing it in a different way. And again, because we want it to be authentic and sound conversational, if someone reads it out loud and it's kind of stilted and sounds weird and doesn't sound like how you intended it, that's a great way to pick up on anything that sounds odd and not quite right.
Right. I love it. It's so actionable. I know that from music and other endeavors of mine, but it's hard to make that leap to start sharing your stuff and getting that advice. But man, if you can put your ego at the door, it makes such a difference.
Yeah, definitely. And especially if you're writing copy, if you're going to be writing copy for, you know, businesses, you know, get someone else to have a look at it first and read it out. And you can just, a small tweaks can make a huge difference to that flow.
Yeah. Well, so I want to be conscious of time. We're gonna go a little over today, but this is too good to just wrap up early. But and this is a question I had before, and already it seems a little ridiculous, because there's all of these elements that really have to be considered to write good copy, but specific to copy that sells. So when you're now in that sales point and you're trying to sell a product, do you have any specific considerations or tools or advice
I
for
do.
that time when you know it's time to sell? Yeah.
Yes, I do. And like what we're doing now, we're diving into the action lens, like, which again for us is persuading someone to do something there, which is often to purchase, right? That's probably the end of your marketing funnel, usually, is to sell something, right?
Yeah.
And there are definitely what we call conversion copywriting techniques that you can use. It comes again back from, it's very similar to sales psychology, but on paper or digital paper. I will give you these techniques, but again, I will say, use them wisely. Don't overdo it, because then you run the risk of sounding like the car salesman. But some techniques you can use. I mean, one of the main ones, this is what kind of age-old copywriting advice is: if you're selling a product and you're talking about product features, you should be marrying them up to benefits, right? Features you can talk about, but every feature should be married to a benefit. How is that feature going to change the life of your prospect, right? What's it going to do for them? So leading with benefits is a very powerful way to sell. Then if you want to kind of close the deal, we have some techniques. One is social proof. Social proof is huge. Social proof is so important, because if you think about psychology for a second, as humans, we are busy people, right? Whenever you buy things, even in the B2B world, usually you're not going to really weigh up the ins and outs, pros and cons of every single competitor on the market, right? It doesn't happen. You go along, you make often kind of an emotional decision, a gut feeling about something, because we make shortcuts. Like, the human brain makes shortcuts in order for us to just go about our daily business. And that includes buying things. One shortcut that we make is that if everyone else thinks that's a good product, it's probably a good product, right? We make that shortcut. So social proof is crucial. By that, I mean testimonials, right? Weaving testimonials into your site, or landing page. Saying things like, I'll give you an example. MailChimp used to have this on their homepage. They said something like, and I think this was the main header, something like, 35 million marketers like you use MailChimp to send emails every day, or something. It was along those lines. It's instant social proof. It's like, okay, wow, it must be great. That's what your brain thinks. It removes the barrier of, can I trust these guys or not? Because we make that shortcut. That's social proof. Another thing we can do to turn the heat up is a sense of urgency, or a sense of scarcity. So you probably know from sites like booking.com, they really do it. They really harness sense of urgency and scarcity. If you've ever booked kind of a hotel through booking.com, they go, well, only 5 people looking at this deal now, or there's only
Right.
two rooms left, or all of that. And it works because of FOMO. FOMO is one of the strongest kind of emotions, if you can call that we can harness as marketers and salesmen people and copywriters. So even by, again, using the word today, sprinkling that in without it sounding really cheesy and over the top, it does help. And thinking through offers that do have a sense of urgency, that's going to help. If you're running an offer for a certain period of time, 15% off, and it ends at the end of the week, that's going to create that sense of urgency. Because otherwise, people just, if they don't have a sense of urgency, they like to just continue their day-to-day lives, the status quo. Let's just keep it easy. But if there's a reason for them to act fast now or this week, it will generally increase your conversion rate. Again, if it's done within reason, it's done subtly, and it's done in an authentic way that's still conversational and doesn't sound like you're really, really pressurizing them.
Yeah. Well, and you do have to honor the urgency you're promoting, right? Too, like, if you say a sale lasts a week and then it's 2 weeks, you're hurting
100%. I
trust.
think
Yeah.
when it comes to both, so using psychology in marketing and copywriting, there is there are ethics, as you need to think about that, right? Don't make it up, because if they see through that, then everything will crumble, right? It's not having the desired effect. And I don't know if this is going off too much on a tangent, but I think clickbait is, if we all know clickbait, they're scrolling through social, they use human psychology to kind of pull you out of social by using what we call the curiosity gap, which is very, very powerful. Tom Cruise fell over and you never guess what happened next,
Right.
right?
Right.
Our brains are wired to want to close that gap of information because we're curious creatures. So it's a very powerful technique. We call it the intrigue lens. But the problem with clickbait, the reason why it gets a bad rep, is that you click through and there's some god awful article with 1 million ads and it's written really badly. And probably I think they've turned up the tap on that using curiosity a bit too much. It's a bit too aggressive. So the combination is like a bad experience. But if you use it subtly, you use a bit of the curiosity gap and it leads them to some content, a page, an offer that's truly valuable to them, that they really want, that's going to solve their problems, then that's great. I think there's, so ethics wise, you can, I believe, use some psychology to increase the chances of them clicking through if you're going to be offering something that's good for them and good for the world as well.
Right. I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, and I always appreciate when I see a creator or when I end up buying something because of a clickbaity little phrase and I like the thing. I love that because I'm just like, you got me, and I did want this.
Yeah, completely.
So I appreciate it. Yeah. Um, we've got just a few more questions here. I did want to get to Twin Kennedy's question because it's a great, just like actionable thing to like wrap up slowly here. Twin Kennedy was saying, do you have any advice on how to make writing copy a part of your weekly business schedule? We write when we have important releases, but want to be sending more frequent updates and need a schedule. So, any just like your daily schedule advice on how to get better about not just sending emails when you have something to sell, but actually building a delight with your customers and using copy to build trust?
Yeah, good question. I'll dissect it again. I think that first thing to say is that if you want to be a better copywriter, writing a lot does help. Reading good copy and writing good copy helps, even if you're just doing it and not sending it out to customers and clients. But I think back to the actual question there, it feels like it's almost more of a content strategy question, which is my domain as well. That's more of what I do these days. And I think I think that there's a lot you can do with content and copy with current customers or people who have subscribed, who are like, marketing qualified leads, let's say, that it comes back to probably the value lens. If you're just sending things out when you want something from them, that's fine. But, how can you add value and create value? And that's where content marketing comes in, thinking about what can I do again to solve the challenges that my target audience has. What can I do to answer their questions, to help them with their lives? For example, we write blog content around creative copywriting and brand strategy and content marketing, content strategy. It's selfless value that we're putting out there into the world. It's good for SEO. And then we send teasers to our current customers and our email list who aren't yet customers. So we're nurturing them. We're making sure that we're in their inbox, again, with nice, valuable content, not just salesy content. So I would say mix, if you've got an important release, that's great. You definitely want to push that out there. But if you can think through content buckets, like what kind of topics can I talk about that would be valuable to my audience? How can you become a thought leader, a sort of a trusted advisor to them beyond just someone that's selling a product or a service? And that falls into content marketing. But I hope that's good enough of an answer.
Well, and what I'm hearing too, which I love, is that worry less about how often you're sending emails and focus on what value can you offer and then play that across a calendar, right?
Exactly. And you
Yeah.
probably intuitively understand and know that if you're just trying to push products, you your audience probably wouldn't want that in their inbox every
Right.
other day, every few days. But if you're giving them selfless value, why not? Why would they get annoyed, or why would it have a negative effect or reaction? So yeah, it's about value-driven content marketing, which is it's a big topic. It might be
Yeah.
a topic for another day.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, so just two more short questions here.
sure.
One, before we wrapped up, I want to know, can you point to a creator, a platform, a brand, and I'm sure there's many, but just like one or two sources for just brilliant copy. So people or places where like every time you see it, it's inspiring, or you're like, man, that was a great job. Whoever's doing their stuff is great. Uh, and if it's plugging some company you work for as well, and it's your copy, I love it. But also just, yeah, I always love to know people's inspirations and where they find kind of value and inspiration.
First of all, our blog, obviously, the
Yeah.
Creative Copywriter blog. Find us, read our stuff. It's great, very nicely branded. That's my little plug. But yeah, it's a good question. You know what? In a B2C perspective, Innocent Innocent smoothies are incredible. They do really great stuff. You can probably see from the bottles, every touch point is really thought through. That brand voice carries through all of their content. And one thing they did really well during COVID, actually, and you can look back if you're interested in this kind of stuff, you can go onto their Instagram page and look back through their past posts. And again, you may think that a kind of B2C products like that, they should just be talking about their smoothies and things like that. But what they did, they shifted at the beginning of COVID to more of this almost value-driven content marketing approach, where they were creating fun, kind of quirky, slightly valuable content, like what to do when you're stuck indoors during lockdown, like 12
Huh.
things to do. And some of them were funny, some were valuable, and it was really using their tone of voice. And again, just creating this feeling uh, of personality. It's like a friend. I have this friend, this funny friend, and they're dropping into my socials every day, and I have that consistency across the board. And consistency is hugely important. From social all the way through to website to the actual product packaging itself. So because again, I think I mentioned before that part of branding is personification, and what we're doing is giving the brand the voice and the words. If I started speaking in a French accent for the final 2 minutes of this talk, you might think, hang on, what's going on? I maybe don't trust Konrad as much as I was starting to.
Who is the real
Breaks,
Konrad?
who is, yeah. He's a fraud, he's a phony. It breaks the trust. So it's because that break in consistency, which, again, another little detour there. But I think Innocent are great. Nike write great copy, which is kind of intertwined with just great video production and amazing brand. And if I've got time, I'll mention one
Yeah.
campaign, which is this is from the past. If you were to say one thing that sticks out or has stuck out, so Avis, as in Avis Rent-A-Cars, had one of the most brilliant campaigns, lasted around 30 years. I think from the 70s on. I'm probably not getting the dates right. They did something incredible. So they had this campaign where what they did is which is a nice little copywriting technique. They admitted weakness, which is very powerful. So the campaign was along the lines of, Avis, we're number 2 in rent-a-cars, so we try harder. Right? So Hertz were kind of number 1. And they had variations of it. We're number 2, so we have to try harder. We have to offer this. Our customer service is better. And it's incredible because, and it's such a powerful technique, because if you're saying we're number 1, and it's only feels like intuitive to go, oh, we're number one at this. And I've seen it with Get Here over here, Get Here deliveries. They're like, we're number one. We're the number one delivery app in the UK. I'm like, but what does that mean? Everyone's saying they're number one. It's lost all meaning. Where's the proof? Where's the evidence? If you say we're number two, or we don't offer this, immediately you build trust, because it's not like in your face bragging. It's like, oh, they're admitting weakness, so I trust them. Now let me read and consider what their message is. And that was such a beautiful campaign that worked for so long. And you can hopefully see like why it's so great and why it's so powerful, because it's, you know, going against the grain of what most salespeople and marketers try to do.
Yeah. I I love that this last hour, whether we intend it or not, is also just a celebration of the written word. Man, is it
Yeah.
powerful and incredible. But Conrad, I know we are like over an hour and we've gone. I appreciate so much you giving so much insight and so much time. And I know it's getting late for you, so we're going to wrap up today. But everyone, please hop in the comments. Thank Konrad for his time. Holler if there was a specific takeaway. We love seeing what you got out of this event. And my last question is quite, well, it's a little twofold. First off, just where can people learn more about you, learn more from you? I know you have a lot of resources from courses and just free resources as well. And specifically, we've had a few people commenting, where can we get these 13 lenses? Because wow, does that sound powerful.
Yeah, well, I think, Jonah, if I send you a link to our kind of 13 lenses materials, you can send it on, hopefully, to everyone that's attended or everyone that's watching the video. You can follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn. That's a good place, LinkedIner. I get kind of hopefully quite fun and valuable and authentic, all of the above content out on LinkedIn. And what was was there? I feel like there was one more. Well, if you actually want to go down the path of learning to become a copywriter, be a freelance copywriter, if I've inspired you enough, we have, a copywriting course bundle, on the Teachable platform, and it's you can find it through our main agency website. So our website is creative-copywriter.net. Again, we'll probably email this out, and then you can go /academy. And so if you actually want to learn really the ins and outs of the art and science of copywriting, but also how to set yourself up as a freelancer, how to win clients, how to market yourself, how to brand yourself. That's what's kind of unique about our course, is that it's the full package. Everything we've learned, everything I learned across a kind of 10-year journey, it's in there, including things we only just figured out as an agency 6 months ago. We're like, let's just pack it into this like valuable course. So a few
Awesome.
options for you there.
Yeah, yeah. And for everyone watching, if you're watching live or the replay, if you're watching live and you signed up for the event, we will email you all of those links. If you didn't RSVP to the event, give us like a minute, an hour or so. I'll make sure they're in the YouTube description there. And once again, just thank you so much, Konrad. This has been a blast. And so many of these things we've been talking about in the last month have been given context talking to you, and it makes me overjoyed. And for everyone watching, if you've been at those past spotlight events, I hope you're seeing how all these little cogs connect. I got a lot to think about after today, so I'm gonna go write some stuff just to get start putting this in practice. But any final words before we wrap up for the day? Anything else you want to say to everyone before we call it quits?
Nothing really. I was just looking at my face going, if you're wondering why I look so tired, it's because it's 8 p.m. here in London, and I had 2 pitches today that were back to back, which we never usually do. So, busy agency day. I just thought I would, get that off my chest. Not a very important final last thought, but there you go.
No, but well, and once again, thank you for taking your time, especially some of your evening, to hang and talk with us and educate us. It was a blast having you. Hope to see you again, and have a wonderful night. Sleep well, and we'll
Thank
talk to you
you.
soon.
Also, thanks for having me. It's been really, really fun.
Cheers. Have a wonderful day, Conrad, and have a wonderful day, everyone watching. We'll see y'all soon.